So without further ado, we'll get started. My name is Rebecca Kochenderfer. I am so honored to be the host of this homeschooling how-to marathon. I'm the senior editor and co-founder of Homeschool.com. And with us for the next hour is an author and homeschooling speaker that I have been wanting to speak with and interview, it seems forever. I have read her book, The Classical Mind, The Well-Trained Mind, A Guide to Classical Education at Home, cover to cover, and I swear I really did. That's a big, thick book. So I'm very honored to be able to introduce to you Susan Weiss Bauer. Susan's parents taught her at home for most of elementary and middle school, all of high school. She entered college at 17 as a presidential scholar and national merit finalist, and finished her BA in 5 semesters with a major in English, a minor in Greek, and a summer spent studying 20th century theology as a visiting student at Oxford. Very, very impressive credentials. I think she's a genius. She and her mother co-authored the book, The Well-Trained Mind, A Guide to Classical Education at Home. And, of course, classical education has become very, very popular in homeschooling, and many parents are interested in this method because it has turned out some of the greatest minds of our time. So we have Susan for the next hour. I'll be asking her some questions. We'll have a nice discussion. And then I'll hope to open up the call so that you can speak with Susan and ask her your own questions. So, Susan, thank you very much for your time today.
You're welcome.
I can tell from our records we have 98 people on the call right now.
Okay.
I know that people are very interested in learning more about the classical approach to education.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you were homeschooled yourself.
Yes.
And you have 3 sons and a daughter.
Yes, that's right.
Do you homeschool your own children?
I do. My husband and I do, I should say.
Oh, that's excellent. So you really are a homeschooling expert as well.
Well,
nobody wants to be an expert about homeschooling, but
yeah. No, well, I so much of what I talk about when I write and do conferences comes from my experience of having been homeschooled. My oldest son is 13. He's going into 8th grade, and so he's in his 7th grade, and so I'm gaining more experience on the parenting side as well.
Well, Susan, that beeping sound that you hear is a good sound. It's the sound of more people coming on the call.
Okay.
So don't let that disturb you at all.
All right.
But I'd like to talk with you about why did you choose classical education for your own children?
I wanted to give them an education which would teach them how to think. I wanted them to know that learning was not something you just do in 12 years from age 6 to age 18, but something that goes on your whole life. And there's a great emphasis on classical education in continuing to learn, continuing to think, continuing to analyze your whole life. I wanted them to be able to enjoy reading. I wanted them to write well. I have taught writing and literature at the College of William and Mary in Virginia for the last 9 years, I guess now, and have just been increasingly frustrated, as have most of my colleagues, with the declining writing and expression skills of our incoming freshmen. And I see them at such a disadvantage, not able to express themselves well in writing. I didn't want my children to have that same disadvantage, and so I wanted to take charge of that myself.
Well, Susan, I'm going to ask you another question, and while you're discussing that, I'm going to go on to the operator because we've reached maximum capacity for this call.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask them to open up some more lines because people are getting turned away now. I don't want them to miss a word. So while I'm doing that, could you talk about what are the benchmarks of classical education, and how is it different from other methods?
All right, well, I'll give you the very short version of this. Classical education is not really primarily a matter of learning Greek and Latin. It's really a matter of 2 central distinctives. One, this emphasis on reading, on writing, on talking, on thinking, rather than on mastering a certain body of knowledge. The emphasis in classical education is on the process of learning how to think, learning how to gather information and analyze it and express your opinion about it. And that leads to the second emphasis of classical education, which is this 3-part division of studies, so that when children are younger, you're concentrating on just feeding them information, teaching their basic skills, filling their mind with the things they're going to need to know. As they move on into that middle school age, you begin to teach them to think critically. You begin to teach them the basics of logic. You begin to teach them how to analyze for truth or falsehood. And then as they move on into high school, you shift your emphasis again so that they begin to express their opinions about what they're reading. And these 3 stages really build on each other. young children are very good at absorbing information, but they're not really very critical thinkers. Middle school children want to criticize, they want to analyze, they want to know whether things are true or false. And what you are doing in these first two stages is you are equipping them to be articulate and to be passionate and to have opinions when they're in high school and to be able to express those opinions. So the emphasis on classical education is really on this process of learning.
How is this different from other methods?
Which particular method? I mean, there are a number of methods that use elements of classical education in them. Charlotte Mason was a classical educator. Classical education is what a traditional liberal arts education was, say before 1940 or 1950. I don't know, if you want to throw a particular method at me, I could probably point out some of the differences.
Well, we had a chance to talk with John Taylor Gatto last week, and he talked about how at some of the elite private schools in the country, they're taught a different type of thinking process than we are in our public schools.
Yes, well, so far as I know, and I did not get to hear that interview, but so far as I know that he is talking about this process of learning how to think and analyze and then to use rhetoric to express your opinion.
Yet it sounds like this is what he's talking about.
Yes.
So what is the well-trained mind about?
Well, the well-trained mind explains this basic pattern of education, and then for each grade in each subject gives very specific recommendations for the how-tos, how you try to meet your educational goal, whether it's absorption or critical thinking or self-expression, in each of the subjects in each of the grades. And we also make very specific curricular recommendations. And our goal with this was not to tie parents to any one set of books or even one set of methods, but rather to start to give parents a way to sort of cut through the enormous tangle of homeschool materials that are now available. There's so many out there. And I get the feeling, especially after a summer of going to homeschool conventions, as I've just finished doing, that a lot of parents pick materials by walking through the convention hall and thinking, oh, this looks good, I hope it works. And in order to really pick materials well, you need to have some idea of where you're going. You need to know, what is my goal in 11th or 12th grade? What is the student supposed to look like when they get out of high school? That's the only thing that will really help you to choose your materials and to shape your homeschool program into some sort of coherent pattern. Otherwise, I think you run the risk of just sort of, doing a hit or miss, pick this, pick this, pick this. Maybe I'm covering all the bases, maybe I'm not, but I'm not really sure. So the book was our attempt to begin to give parents a glimpse of that pattern so that then they could, choose the materials themselves.
When you were homeschooled by your parents, did they homeschool you in this classical style?
They did, because when my mother took us out of school, I guess this was in 73, not too many people were homeschooling, and there weren't any support groups, there weren't conventions, and she wrote to all of the private schools that she respected and asked them to describe their curricula. And the schools that she respected were those that were still using this classical method, a lot of parochial schools, very well-regarded private schools. And so she created her curriculum according to this method. That is what she wanted us to have.